welcome to Between the Lines, where we dig into what's said, what's heard, and perhaps, if we're really, really good at it, what the truth is. I'm Steve Lombardo. I'm your host and CEO of PhRMA, and today I have the privilege of being with Alex Schriver. Alex, thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Steve. Great to be here.
Well, Alex, you currently serve as Senior Vice President of Public Affairs at the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers Association, which represents pharmaceutical companies around the world. You are responsible for earned, paid, digital, and social media, as well as executive visibility. Your LinkedIn highlights your role as husband, father, and son before your professional title. What inspired that choice?
You know, for me, it's really rooted in my family. I have a wonderful wife and two beautiful daughters. They're the heart of everything that I do. I put that first to really just remind myself, while we're certainly defined by our career, it doesn't make us who we are. My job is incredibly important and I take it very seriously. But at the end of the day, I come home to my wife and two wonderful daughters.
Well, and how does that influence your day-to-day in your professional life? Does it cause you to think differently, perhaps?
I think it does. I think in two ways. One, the work itself. I'm passionate about the work we do and representing the member companies that we have at PhRMA that are working to develop the next generation of treatments and cures for the deadliest, costliest, sickest diseases. I'm very fortunate to have two healthy, happy daughters.
Right.
But I know that can change. And I know that when you get sick, you need a medicine. And so that's in one way. The other is really to be able to compartmentalize the work. Again, what we do is incredibly important, and it's can be very stressful,
right.
But it's important to be able to compartmentalize that at the end of the day and not bring that home with you.
You represent one of the largest trade associations in this country, yet also one of the most polarized industries in some respect. What is that like, and how does that test you day to day?
Our companies wake up every day to develop the next generation of treatments and cures here in America. And we want to support a system where patients can actually access and afford the medicines and treatments that they need.
Right.
And so we're driven by that North Star, and I believe in the work we do on behalf of our 32 member companies to produce a policy environment where our companies can thrive for that next breakthrough, for that next treatment. And so for us, we have to localize and humanize what our companies do and who our companies are.
So what's the biggest misconception that people have about pharmaceutical companies?
Well, it's a great question. You know, I think one major misconception, and actually when you introduced me, you said the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America. And if you look at really every single word of our name, it's important to understand that our companies are developing, researching, creating, going through clinical trials. They're not just simply manufacturing a drug. You know, 90% of drugs fail. And so it's really about investing in the next generation of treatments and cures and going through the entire process from an idea to a medicine cabinet.
Those 90% that fail, how does that work?
Well, it's a long process. And so, you know, a company can start with, you know, an idea, and that goes into the research, and then it goes into eventually something that becomes a phase 1 clinical trial, all the way through a phase 3 clinical trial when a drug can actually then go to market.
So there are a lot of steps in the process. Before you started in pharma, you had never worked directly in healthcare. So what was the learning curve for you stepping into this role?
It was big. I think at PhRMA, policy is currency. And I often say we do advocacy in the minutia. Details matter. And so, I've spent a lot of time over the past 2 years learning the industry, learning the issues. I had done multi-client public affairs and represented clients in energy, financial services, tech, and some healthcare, but certainly not at the depth. And so to go from a mile wide to an inch wide and a mile deep, it's certainly a lot of acronyms and a lot of history, going back to Medicare Part D and the passage of the ACA and then the passage of the IRA, these sort of major tentpole moments that we've had in our industry to really understand the history and the evolution of the industry, and not just of who our companies are and where the science is headed, but also the policy and advocacy environment and how that's changed over the past few decades as well.
So you got your start in after college in campaign politics. Tell me about that.
I did. I was always active in campaigns and politics. Going back even in high school, I chaired the Teenage Republicans, was active in college Republicans when I was at Auburn University. And then when I graduated, jumped on campaigns and worked on a couple of campaigns for governor, for Congress. And in 2013, I served as campaign manager for Bradley Byrne in a special election for Alabama's first congressional district. Mr. Byrne won that campaign and then asked me to come serve as his chief of staff. And so that was my first time in government job or a real world job outside of campaigns and sleeping in hotels. And the rest is sort of history.
And so you got to Washington in 2014.
So I had actually come up in 2010 and done some political work, and then went back to Alabama to do the campaign.
What is the biggest misconception that people have about Washington, D.C. communications, media, people like yourself?
I think on the good side, I've lived in this town for over 15 years now. I live, work, and raise a family here. The individuals that I'm interacting with, whether they're at a member company, whether it's a reporter, they're doing their job as well, right? Those individuals live, work, and raise a family here too. And so, assume good intent. That everyone here has a job. The flip side of that is I like to use the expression, nothing is organic. What I mean by that is whenever you read a news story, you should always understand there's always two sides of that story. There's someone pushing it and someone trying to stop it. Right. Whether that's advertising or earned media, always approach with a healthy dose of skepticism because there's always two sides. And that sort of was the breakthrough in Washington for communications.
What I really liked about the beginning of your answer in particular was your point about communicators in Washington, D.C., New York, L.A., Chicago, wherever you are, they're human beings too.
That's right.
And perhaps better understanding the human side is something AI can't do, so we'll see. We talk now about the political and regulatory landscape that is constantly shifting.
Sure.
And this year more than ever before. How do you help your team stay on message and continue playing offense when the direction is sometimes shifting and moving at a pace that we've not seen previously? How do you do that?
Well, it's interesting because having had a background in campaigns and politics and then Capitol Hill, I actually think it served me well for the current moment that we're in. When I served as chief of staff, I often tell this story of every day I'd go to work and I'd print off my to-do list for the day. I might print off the congressman's schedule. And when I drove home, if my day looked anything like those two pieces of paper, it was a success, right? Every time your phone rings, you're not quite sure what's on the other line. It could be a constituent, it could be a local mayor,
Sure.
It could be leadership. We describe our team as the win the day team. And so we approach every day with sort of the tactics of paid media, earned media, executive visibility, state and local grassroots to apply against a strategy to win the day. But the strategy is set and adaptable and moldable and changeable based on external factors.
Agility is important. What's your biggest challenge today that you face in your job in trying to communicate on behalf of the pharmaceutical industry?
I think it's really the misconception of what our companies do, right? And understanding that these companies, wake up every day to find the next generation of breakthroughs.
Right.
In order to be a member of pharma, you have to reinvest a percentage of your sales into R&D. So these are not single companies with single drugs on a single patent. These are companies that are really looking at the future and their pipeline. And so I think explaining to folks that those are the sort of companies that we represent and trying to advocate for.
What we deal with a lot in this video series is to try to better understand how to communicate, what breaks through, how do you really connect with people in an age of distrust, mistrust with information. Certainly AI being layered on is also an additional obstacle to doing that?
Well, I like to use the expression localize and humanize, right? We really have to follow the mantra that trust is local and communications is personal. And so it's insights like that that help you understand how you effectively communicate and sort of getting out of the big and broad and into the localize and humanize to tell our story and get our message across.
Thank you very much for coming today, Alex.
Thanks, Steve.
I appreciate it.